Hello and welcome to Easy Piecy Quilts. My name is Julia Tiedemann, and today we are going to talk about the Angels Wear Scrubs quilt pattern. This quilt pattern is really awesome, very close to my heart. I've been in medicine for over 20 years and I cannot say enough about my co-workers. They are selfless, they are amazing people, constantly willing to help, constantly willing to give. And this quilt was designed in recognition of all the wonderful qualities that they express on a daily basis. The quilt features a Red Cross block on angel wings as the central component of the quilt. And then you'll notice that there is stitching around each block and bandages that indicate that our healthcare workers bandage and stitch other patients and people's lives together with compassion and love, as symbolized by the hearts. So this quilt is chock full of meaning. It would be wonderful for that nurse in your life, that doctor in your life, someone who's graduating in a medical profession from college or medical school, nursing school, or someone that's made a difference in your life who is a medical provider. So I hope you enjoy Angels Wear Scrubs, and welcome to this tutorial. As a reminder, we do have kits for a lot of our patterns. This kit will be, Angels Wear Scrubs will have a kit associated with it. The pattern is included in the kit. The option for this quilt, because it only comes in one size on the pattern, the kit will either be just the top and the pattern, or the backing is also an option that you can add to the kit when you order. And I will show you, it's the same backing that I used on my quilt. I think it goes really nicely with the reds in the crosses. So that is available, and I hope you enjoy the tutorial. Okay, so this is a close-up of the pattern that we are going off of. Angels Wear Scrubs. It's pattern 131. And the first block that we are going to make is the big Red Cross block. So for this block, you need 8 half square triangles that are half blue and half white. And so we are going to make those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for each block. We are going to make 8 of those at a time and make it easy. So for each block, you're going to need one of these squares, and the cutting instructions are in the pattern. So to make an 8 at a time half square triangle, you are going to take a ruler and draw a line across from corner to corner one way on the lighter colored square, and the same thing going the opposite corners. And so now what we do is we sew a 1/4 of an inch seam on one side of this line. We sew a 1/4 inch seam on the other side of the line, and same thing here. 1/4 inch seam here and a 1/4 inch seam here, and I will be back as soon as I get that completed. We are going to cut across the center of this square 4 times. We are going to cut this way, and then also along the lines that we drew. Now, initially, I was cutting these apart by going on the lines and cutting on the line here. And then you've got 4 pieces that you're trying to keep aligned while you're cutting these pieces making this cut across here and this cut across here. And I found that it was actually easier to do the cuts that are not marked first, and I'll show you why. So if we go ahead and cut across here, and I make sure that this side of the ruler's lined up, this side of the ruler's lined up, so you're getting a relatively straight cut across. And then don't move anything, and if it kind of shifts a little bit, put it back. And then you cut across here. And again, I'm kind of looking at my line here that I cut. I'm looking down here. Yep, that's straight. Yep, that's straight. And then I'm going across here. And then all of a sudden, you can pull these apart. It doesn't matter, you know, if they're off a little bit or whatnot. And I just went along and didn't even have to use a ruler to cut the rest of them apart. And it's a lot easier than trying to line up all those pieces and make sure that you're cutting straight. Anyway, that's just a little tip that I found along the way. And then now all of a sudden, you will see that you have 8 half square triangles ready to make your block. These half square triangles are bigger than what they are supposed to be in the block. So you will trim these just a smidge, but you will trim them because after all, when you're making 8 at a time half square triangles, they're not going to be exact. They're going to shift a little bit, that kind of thing. So there's a little wiggle room and you'll go ahead and trim these. And really, it doesn't matter. I went ahead and pressed towards the darker fabric on these, but you can press however you'd like to. And then once I have these pressed and trimmed, we will continue on with the block. Now we are going to be making one of the wings. There are 4 of these on this block, and they are all exactly identical. So if we make one of these, and I show you how to do that, then we'll make 4, and then we'll piece the rest of the block with the red cross. So here are our half square triangles. They've been trimmed. I've paired them up in the orientation that they're supposed to be in with the half square triangles. We've got a background square and then a blue square. And I think the best way to do this is to sew these 2 pieces together and sew these 2 pieces together. And then when I press these, I'm going to press toward the square, the plain square fabric piece. And that's going to allow me to nest this seam when I then sew these 2 units together. So, like I said, first of all, we'll put this together and this together, and then I'll show you how we nest the seams. Here are our 2 pieces sewn together. I'm going to flip that, and as you can see, since we pressed toward the plain fabric square, we have nice nested seams. And so I'm going to sew along this, and we'll open that up, and then we'll add our side pieces. Our wing is done, and now we are going to put a little plain background rectangle on this side, and once we have sewn that on, we are going to add this rectangle piece, and that will complete this whole component of the block. So we do that 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then I will come back with the red cross portion cut out, and we'll put the block all the way together. Here are the red cross pieces. I have taken the red cross piece and put the background pieces on the either end of all of the red pieces. And I completed our angel wing sections that we just talked about. And we can lay our block out. Okay, so what I do is I sew this row together. So I take and put these 2 seams in. This is already completed. It will go here. And then the same thing down here. I'll go ahead and sew these 2 seams. And then I will take this component and sew it to the center, and this component and sew it to the center, and we will have our block complete. Here is the finished block. You can see that our points at the corners of the wings are pretty much perfect, and that's because we nested those seams when we put this block together. There really aren't any other matching seams in this quilt block. So that's relatively easy because when we're sewing this seam, none of that really has to line up with anything else. And so you can press the other seams pretty much as desired, and it will look great. The next block we're going to talk about is the sashing block. The sashing blocks are the blocks where there are stitches going through around our block that we just made, the Red Cross block. So this is strip pieced. So all those little stitches look like they take forever, like you've cut a million little pieces, but we haven't. You will need 2 of these strip sets. This one's already been cut off of for my quilt, but this is all that you need. You'll sew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 strips together with the fabric, and the pattern will tell you how wide to cut them. And then you will just take your ruler. I'm going to flip this because I'm right-handed, but you're just going to flip this and you're going to cut your strips right off of the strip set here. And there you have your stitching. So you're going to, like I said, make 2 of these strip sets. You'll cut all of your stitching out of that. That makes it really fast. And then you have 2 pieces that you're going to sew on either side. And that will make your sashing. And the only word of caution that I can tell you about this particular part of the quilt is that if you do not have accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seams, you are not going to get the length that you need to match up with the pieces that go on the side here. You can see that mine line up pretty perfectly, but I really made all attempts and was very cautious to have that accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, because otherwise, if you don't, you're going to have it too long, too short. It's going to be frustrating. You can, if you get it a little bit too long, trimming the ends of these off, you're not really going to notice that at all. That would probably be the better of 2 evils. But go ahead and sew these 2 sides on that strip piece, and you will have all your sashing done. Here is our completed sashing strip. So we've got that done. There are 40 of these that you'll need to do for the quilt. And our next portion is the cornerstone heart. So in order to complete that, you're going to have 2 red rectangles, and then you're going to put 2 squares at the top and then 1 square across the bottom. And you can see I already stitched this heart from corner to corner here, corner to corner on both of these. And because, let me get my pen, because this is a heart, this side is going to be a mirror image of this side. So the top, you're going to stitch exactly the same. You're going to stitch from these corners this way. This may not be exact doing this on the fly, but so you're going to do that, these the same, but then this one, the stitching is going to go in the opposite direction from the opposite corner. So once we get done stitching, and we're going to stitch on the line on this stitching, not a 1/4 of an inch from the line, actually on the line. And then we are going to trim. I usually just use my 1/4 inch mark on the ruler, and I trim a 1/4 of an inch away from my stitching. Trim this up. And I always, whenever I do a stitch and flip, I always press my seams open. I just think it lays so much flatter. I can't get that open. It lays so much flatter, and it's so much easier in the end. Well, I really can't get that open. But anyway, I will press this open. I'll stitch this, and then I'll show you where we connect those two pieces. Here are the 2 halves of the heart. I have pressed the seams open so they're laying nice and flat for me. And then the only thing we have to do left to complete this block is to sew these 2 pieces together. So we'll just flip this, sew along here, and we will have our heart. Now you'll notice that this heart is kind of pointy on the top, but that is okay, because when we get it in the, well, I can't, where's the, when we get it in pieced into the quilt top, there will be a seam allowance here, and that will take that point out, and it'll kind of round the heart a little bit more. So I wouldn't worry about, it kind of looks funny now, but it will look better once it's put into the quilt top. I brought the quilt over just to kind of show you the central block, and then we just made the sashing strips. One here, one goes on top, all the way around to the bottom of the quilt right here. And then these cornerstone blocks, so we just made our heart. And like I told you, the heart, once it gets pieced into the quilt top, it rounds out. It looks more like a normal heart. And then our last component of the quilt top that we're going to do is the little bandage on the cornerstone. So let's get started on our bandage cornerstone block. Before we moved on, I just wanted to show you our little heart that I put the 2 sides together. And this is our last portion of the quilt that we're going to learn about. This is the bandage block. It's all laid out. All the cutting instructions obviously are in the pattern. And I want you to kind of think about this block in 3 horizontal rows, even though it's kind of an on-point construction for this block. And the other thing I like to do is, if there is any way that I can chain piece something, I will chain piece it. So I know that in this particular block, every red piece is going to have a triangle on the end of it. So I'm going to go ahead and piece that, and then we'll do the next step. Just one more thing. In order to center these triangles on the top of your squares, I fold them in half, I pinch that, I fold this in half and pinch it, and then I have my centers, and I can go ahead and line those up, those little pinches, and then I know that that will be right in the center of my square. This block, just a heads up, this block is essentially the exact same block that we just did for Come to the Garden. That is my free pattern, currently my free pattern. So if you haven't gone to my website at Easy Piecy Quilts and grabbed that, that is a great introduction into how to do this block as well. We have our triangles on all of our red squares. The next step is going to be to attach these side triangles to this piece, and you're going to line that corner up. This corner right here is going to line up, And you will notice that it should be right about 1/4 of an inch right here from the edge where you're just going to stitch down. Not always, but just stick, if not, stick with your 1/4 inch seam allowance. But you're going to sew this on, and then this one goes obviously on this side, and the same thing down here. We're going to sew those together. And then the other thing we're going to sew together is we're going to sew these 2 red pieces to either side of the blue piece. So once we get that done, we will have all 3 rows complete of our block, and then I'll show you what to do from there. I want to talk about the pressing on this block for just a second. So on all of the triangles, I just went ahead and pressed them back. So that is how they are pressed. And then once those were pressed back, then I went ahead and pressed these side triangles the same way. I just pressed them away from the center. And the reason that I did that is because these seams are pressed out. And then I went ahead and pressed the seams between the red and the blue in. And then these down here are pressed out. So what you will get is you will get a nested block where when you line up these horizontal rows to sew them, you will get nested seams, if you can see that, and it will make it really, really easy to line up the 3 components of this block. So we're going to sew this seam and this seam, nesting those corners right here, and we should end up with a very pretty block with nice corners. Let's see how we do. Here is our finished block, and I think it looks pretty good. So on this block, you will come on the back, you'll trim these dog ears, which are the little hangover pieces from this triangle on the edges of the block here. And then, so that'll kind of get your backside cleaned up. And then we are going to trim this. I designed this block to be quite a bit bigger around the edges so that if you were off a little bit with your triangles or your sewing was a little bit off, that it would not be a big deal. So what you want to put through the center of this block is you want to go ahead and line up the 1 3/4 on either on this way. We're going to go to 1 3/4, and I want that line through this center, and then I also want 1 3/4 coming this way, going through the center. And that one's kind of hard to see on this ruler as well, but the 1 3/4 going through here. And then once I have that, I can just go ahead and trim the block, and then I just turn it, and I do the same thing on this side. I do 1 3/4 through the center and 1 3/4 through the center that way. So you'll notice this ruler goes in 1 3/4, and that's going through the center of this block. Same thing down here. You go down to 1 3/4, and we've got that hash going through the center. And then you also kind of just want to pay attention to this line here, this line over here. Make sure it's all kind of looking good. Oh, it wants to turn and turn and turn. Doesn't want to stick. All right, and then once I have that side all lined up, then I just trim that. And then my block is nice and trimmed. It's the exact size I need to go ahead and piece my sashing with. Here's the sashing. So it goes on this way, and that is the last little block we need for our quilt. For many of my patterns that I design, I do research during the design, before the design, after the design. And I did draw inspiration from a company called Tweedledee Design, and I wanted to recognize them. I have linked their website below. They have beautiful painted barn quilts designs. Their website is gorgeous. They're a US based company, and I wanted to go ahead and recognize them for the inspiration that they gave me. And please check out their website, and hopefully you will enjoy their designs as much as I have.